He thought he'd save the marriage. She thought she'd destroy it forever. But neither of them expected how the game would end. And are you ready for the final chord? Don't turn away, or you'll never know what freedom sounds like. I never imagined my marriage to Olivia would crumble like this. For years, we'd been the couple others envied, two high school sweethearts who built a life in Seattle. But that night, as I pushed roasted vegetables around my plate, she set her fork down with a clink. Her voice cut through the silence like a blade. "Ethan, I don't want to be intimate anymore." My hand froze mid-bite. The clock above the sink ticked louder. "You're joking," I said, forcing a laugh. But her eyes stayed cold, rehearsed. "It's not about you. I've changed." The room tilted. 12 years of shared mornings, Christmases, ER visits for her migraines, all reduced to "it's not about you." I gripped the table's edge. "Olivia, we're married. This isn't a Netflix subscription you cancel on a whim." She glanced at her phone buzzing on the counter, a habit I'd ignored for months. "I need space. I became a man obsessed with fixing what I couldn't see." That weekend, I booked us a suite at the Fairmont, where we'd celebrated our 5th anniversary. Roses, champagne, the works. She texted midway through dinner, stuck at work. When she finally arrived, her perfume smelled unfamiliar, spicier, reckless. "You didn't have to do all this," she said, eyeing the petals on the bed like they were litter. I reached for her hand. She flinched. That's when I noticed the ring. Her ring. The one I'd sold my vintage Stratocaster to buy. She'd stopped wearing it months ago. Now it glinted under the chandelier, a mockery. 2 weeks later, I saw them. Rain lashed my windshield as I idled outside her office. Olivia laughed, her head tossed back in a way I hadn't seen in years. A man in a tailored coat held an umbrella over her, his hand lingering on her waist. Then he kissed her. My knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. The Stratocaster's ghost ached in my bones, the guitar I'd given up for a diamond. That night, I dug through her desk. Beneath yoga receipts and expired coupons, I found the envelope. Credit card statements in her name, charges for hotels, lingerie, a weekend in Napa, all while I'd been working overtime to pay her student loans. 3 days after finding the credit card statements, I sat in a dim office above a pawn shop. The air smelled of stale coffee and regret. The private investigator, a wiry man named Russo, slid a folder across his desk. His voice was gravel, like he'd smoked every secret he'd ever uncovered. "Your wife's not just cheating, Mr. Walker. She's rewriting the narrative." Photos spilled out, Olivia laughing with a man in the tailored coat, Marcus. Shots of them entering hotels, her wearing a silver necklace I'd never seen. Russo tapped a timestamp. "Last Thursday, while you were at your mother's chemo appointment." My throat tightened. Mom had asked about Olivia, said she missed her smile. I'd lied, claiming work kept her busy. Now I stared at proof that work was a man's hands unclasping that necklace in room 214. Russo leaned in. "There's more. She's draining you dry." That night, I combed through our shared accounts, a forensic archaeologist of my own betrayal. Subscriptions I never authorized. Charges for couples retreats we never attended. A $5,000 wire transfer to an account named M. Bennett. Marcus Bennett. The guitar in the corner mocked me. I pawned it to buy her ring, sacrificing my band's gigs for her dream of law school. Now her dream funded theirs. I opened her closet where her old floral dresses hung like ghosts. Beneath a box of letters I'd written her, I found it a loan agreement. $30,000 in my name, taken out last year. The signature was mine, a forgery sharper than her eyeliner. The wilted rose from our anniversary still sat on the dresser. I crushed it in my fist, thorns drawing blood. I cornered her at Cafe Lucia, where she'd met Marcus weekly. She wore the necklace, its pendant a jagged obsidian shard. "Who's Marcus?" I asked, sliding a photo of their kiss across the table. Her latte trembled. "A colleague. It's not what you think. Colleagues don't take out loans in their husbands' names." Her mask cracked. "You think you're innocent? You buried yourself in work while I rotted in that house. I paid for everything, and I paid in years." She stood, knocking over the cup. Brown liquid bled across the loan papers. "You want to fight? Fine. But I'll take half of what's left." As she stormed out, the barista shot me a pitying look. I stared at the ruined evidence, the guitar's absence howling in my bones. The law firm's walls were the color of bone, sterile and unforgiving. My reflection in the glass table showed a ghost, pale, frayed at the edges. The attorney, Ms. Vega, flipped through the folder of evidence: photos, forged loan documents, bank transfers to Marcus. Her pen tapped like a metronome counting down to disaster. "She's been planning this," she said. "The hidden debt, the affair. It's textbook alienation of affection. But Oregon's a no-fault state. The cheating won't matter in court. What will matter? The fraud." She pointed at the forged signature. "This is a felony. But press charges and the house, the savings, it all becomes collateral damage." I stared at the guitar case propped by her desk. I'd hauled it here as a reminder. This is what she cost me. Now it felt like a prop in a play I hadn't auditioned for. "What do you want, Mr. Walker? Revenge or freedom?" That night, I roamed rooms that no longer felt like mine. The couch where we'd binge-watched The Office, now a monument to dead laughter. The kitchen where she'd burned pancakes every Sunday, singing off key to Bowie. In the garage, I found her old paint supplies, canvases she'd abandoned for law school, now crusted with cobwebs. Beneath them lay a half-finished portrait of us, my face blurred, hers vivid, as if I'd already begun fading from her story. I dragged the box to the driveway, doused it in gasoline. The match trembled in my hand. For a moment, I saw her as she was at 22, paint-splattered jeans, eyes wild with dreams that included me. The flames roared, devouring the lie. At 3 a.m., I drove to the pawnshop. The clerk, a kid with face piercings, squinted at my ticket. "This thing's been here like forever." The Stratocaster felt lighter than I remembered. A scratch marred its body. The night Olivia had knocked it over during a fight. "It's just a guitar," she'd said. Back home, I plugged into the amp, its hum a long-lost heartbeat. My fingers stumbled over the chords of Blackbird, the song I'd played at our wedding. The notes wavered, then steadied. Through the window, dawn bled red over Portland. I didn't hear Olivia enter. She stood in the doorway, suitcase in hand, her face a mosaic of fury and fear. I kept playing. She left without a word. The last chord hung in the air long after the door slammed. The bar smelled of stale beer and broken promises. I hadn't played live in 7 years, but the Stratocaster felt like an extension of my rage. The host, a woman with neon green hair, smirked at my name. "Original music only, Grandpa." The spotlight blinded me. I strummed the first chord, sharp and dissonant. The crowd's chatter died as the notes clawed through the air, a song I'd written in the garage while Olivia packed her lies into suitcases. "You sold my silence for a diamond noose?" Halfway through, I saw her. Or thought I did. A blonde in the back, head tilted like Olivia's when she used to pretend to care. My fingers slipped. The amp screeched feedback. Someone booed. I finished anyway. Later, a man in a leather jacket handed me a napkin scrawled with a number. "Play like that again," he said, "and you'll need a bigger stage." The papers arrived on a Tuesday. Olivia claimed I threatened her, that I'd harassed her with music. Her lawyer cited the open mic night as proof of instability. Ms. Vega's sigh crackled through the phone. She's painting you as volatile. The guitar, the burned paintings, it plays into her narrative. I stared at the Stratocaster's case, dusted with ash from the driveway fire. What's next? We countersue. Expose the fraud. But it'll get ugly. That night, I played until my fingers bled. The strings stained red, like the rose I'd crushed. Rachel found me at the pawn shop, haggling over a vintage amp. My old bandmate still wore the same combat boots, though her hair was now streaked with gray. Heard you're back from the dead, she said, tossing the clerk a wad of cash. Amps on me? We drove to her garage studio, where my old posters hung like relics. She plugged in her bass. Play the divorce anthem. I did. She joined in, her rhythms anchoring my chaos. For 3 minutes, the world wasn't a courtroom or a crime scene. It was a chord progression. After, she handed me a flyer, Portland Rock Revival. You're headlining. Unless you're still scared of her. The amp hummed. I nodded. The rehearsal space was a tomb of echoes. Rachel's bass thrummed against concrete walls as I adjusted the Stratocaster's tuning, the strings biting into calluses still raw from last night's set. My setlist lay on the floor, songs titled Forged in Fire and empty frames. Each chord felt like exhuming a corpse. Olivia's lawyer had subpoenaed my gig earnings. Now every note I played funded her war against me. I wondered if she'd listened to the recordings, if she'd recognize herself in the lyrics. Probably not. Narcissists never hear their names in the screams. Rachel tossed me a water bottle. You're flat. I'm tired. You're scared. The amp hissed. She was right. A package arrived at the studio, a vintage tube amplifier, the kind I drooled over in college. No return address. The note read, for old times, break a leg. Oh, Rachel kicked the box. It's probably bugged, or rigged to explode. We dissected it like a bomb squad. Inside, nestled in foam, lay a single rose. Dried. Brittle. Identical to the one I'd burned. I smashed the tubes with a crowbar. Glass shards glittered like the diamond she'd once sworn symbolized forever. Ms. Vega called during soundcheck. She's offering a deal. Drop the fraud charges, keep the house. But you quit music. The crowd's murmur seeped through the curtains. I gripped the mic stand, its cold metal anchoring me. Olivia knew this would gut me. A house empty of songs. A life muted. Rachel tuned her bass, eyes locked on mine. Your call. I texted Vega. Tell her I'll see her in court. The stage lights flared. I stepped into the heat, the Stratocaster screaming the truth she'd tried to silence. The courtroom felt smaller than the stages I'd played, its air thick with the scent of polished wood and stale justice. Olivia sat across the aisle, her posture perfect, hair coiled like a serpent. Her lawyer droned about emotional neglect and financial recklessness, projecting screenshots of my song lyrics as evidence of instability. You turned love into a funeral pyre, Ms. Vega countered with forensic reports. The forged loan documents, the credit card trails, Marcus's deposition admitting their affair. Olivia's mask never slipped. She stared at the judge, a statue of wounded virtue. When they called me to the stand, the Stratocaster's strap bit into my shoulder, a deliberate choice. Vega warned against it. Theater, she'd called it. But theater was all Olivia understood. Why did you pursue music during divorce proceedings? Her lawyer asked, sneering. I strummed a single dissonant chord. The judge's gavel froze midair. Because silence, I said, is what got me here. The judge ruled at dusk. Olivia's debts remained hers. The house mine. No alimony. No restraining order. She cornered me in the parking lot, heels clicking like a countdown. You think you won? That house is a tomb. And your music? She laughed, the sound sharp as broken glass. It's a eulogy for a man who never existed. I slid into my truck, her reflection shrinking in the rear view. The Stratocaster lay across the passenger seat, its scratch glowing in the streetlight. I drove to the river and played until the strings bled, the notes swallowed by the black water. The voicemail came at 3 a.m. A record label. Rachel's contact. They'd heard the courtroom clip gone viral. We want an album. Raw. Unfiltered. The truth. I found Olivia's last box in the attic. Wedding photos, love letters, the shriveled rose from her poisoned gift. I didn't burn them. I shredded the letters into confetti, mixed them with glue, and plastered them across the studio walls. Rachel arrived at dawn, bass in hand. We wrote the first track as the sun bled through the papered lies. No lyrics, just chords that climbed, fell, and clawed their way back. When the recording light blinked red, I closed my eyes and played the truth. The album dropped on a Friday. By midnight, it trended number 3 on Spotify's rock chart. Strangers tattooed lyrics on their skin. Critics called it a divorce decree set to music. I played sold-out theaters where the crowd screamed every word back at me, their voices exorcising ghosts I'd carried for years. Olivia's face haunted the front rows. Not her, but imitations, blondes in black dresses, lips stained wine red. They'd clutch the stage, begging me to heal their own broken marriages. I never lingered after shows. Autographs felt like carving my scars into strangers. Rachel handed me a fan letter one night. The envelope smelled like jasmine, her perfume. Inside, a single rose petal. "You owe me royalties," Olivia had written. I burned it in the tour bus sink, watching the edges curl into ash. The journalist wore a smirk and a too-tight blazer. "Your ex-wife's suing for defamation. Says the album's fiction. The studio lights baked my scars raw." I strummed the Stratocaster's opening chord from Forged in Fire. The crew flinched. Music's not fiction. It's autopsy. The clip went viral. Olivia's Instagram flooded with memes, her face photoshopped onto Icarus, plummeting toward comments like "Karma's a bee." That night, I found her parked outside the venue. She revved her engine, headlights blazing. I played an encore with the garage door open, the chords drowning her tires' squeal as she fled. Her bankruptcy notice arrived in a fan mail pile. Marcus had drained her accounts, vanished with a bartender half his age. The court seized her BMW, her designer wardrobe, the necklace I'd seen glinting in Russo's photos. Ms. Vega forwarded the email. "She's requesting a loan." I drove to our old house, now a studio filled with amps and Rachel's murals. In the attic, I boxed the last remnants of Olivia, a silk robe, a toothbrush fossilized by time. The donation center glowed under a stormy sky. As I handed the clerk the box, lightning split the clouds. Thunder rattled the Stratocaster in my back seat. It felt like applause. The charity gala buzzed with champagne flutes and hollow laughter. I'd agreed to play at Rachel's insistence. We need to look human, not just angry. My tuxedo itched like a costume. She found me backstage, clutching a tumbler of bourbon. Olivia stood across the ballroom, her scarlet dress a wound in the sea of black ties. She leaned into a silver-haired investor, her smile brittle. I recognized the necklace he bought her, thicker than mine, but just as hollow. When I took the stage, the crowd hushed. I played Empty Frames, the song about her forged loans. Her laugh cut through the verse, sharp and performative. The investor whispered in her ear. She paled. Later, I saw him leave alone, her clutch abandoned on his table. She cornered me in the parking garage, heels echoing like gunshots. Up close, her makeup cracked at the edges. "You think you're free?" She thrust a dried rose at me, the twin to her poisoned gift. "You'll always be the man I broke." I took it, snapped the stem. "Funny, I remember you begging me to stay." Her slap stung. I laughed, the sound raw and foreign. "You're nothing," she hissed, "and you're predictable." I dropped the rose into a puddle of motor oil. It floated, blackening. The final show of the tour was at the amphitheater where we'd honeymooned. Olivia's empty seat glowed in the front row, a spotlight on absence. I unstrapped the Stratocaster, its scratch gleaming under pyro lights. Rachel handed me the gasoline can. The crowd roared as flames engulfed the guitar. It would split, screaming like the lies we'd burned years ago. Heat seared my face, but I stood still. In the ashes, I found the fretboard, unscathed, the wood grains singing of forests that survived wildfires. Rachel handed me a new guitar. I played the first chord of the encore. Behind me, the flames climbed higher. The morning after the burn, I sifted through the amphitheater's ashes. Blackened strings coiled like dead serpents. The crowd's footprints stamped into the soot, proof the fire had been real, not another nightmare. Rachel joined me, her boots crunching over debris. She held out the salvaged fretboard, its wood still humming with the heat of its rebirth. "Luthier in Brooklyn," she said. "He'll build a new body around it." I traced the scratch Olivia had left years ago. Now it felt like a scar, not a wound. The wind scattered ash over the city. Somewhere a car radio played Empty Frames. The new guitar arrived. On the Equinox, a sleek, obsidian body cradling the old maple neck. I played the first chord in the empty studio, the sound deeper, darker, alive with the ghosts of both fires. Rachel brought a cellist, a drummer, a choir of strangers who'd survived their own Olivius. We wrote a symphony not of anger, but of aftermath. The cellist's bow drew blood from her strings. The drummer's stick splintered. My fingers bled again, but this time the pain felt sacred. At dawn, we collapsed onto the studio floor, the music still vibrating in the walls. Rachel grinned, her teeth white in the gloom. "We're not done." The comeback concert streamed live from the rebuilt amphitheater. No pyro, no screens, just the orchestra and 10,000 lighters held aloft. I strapped on the new guitar, its fretboard warm as a heartbeat. Halfway through the unbroken note, I saw her. Olivia stood at the back, her hair dyed brown, her posture hunched. She clutched a rose, fresh this time. Our eyes met. I played the final solo with my eyes closed. When I opened them, she was gone. The rose lay trampled near the stage. The crowd roared. Rachel handed me a water bottle. I drank the liquid cool and clean. Backstage, a girl with a guitar case waited. "Your music saved me," she said, trembling. I signed the fretboard, not my name, but a single word: survive. The night air smelled of rain and gasoline. I walked until the crowd's echoes faded. The new guitar slung over my shoulder, its shadow stretching long behind me. One story may be ending, but the excitement never stops. Don't wait. Jump right into the next one and keep the thrill alive.